Hello and welcome to the Collapse Experiment. This is the first of probably many Epstein videos I'm going to be doing. I have Whitney Webb's books on Epstein. I have a few other books on Epstein. And of course, there's always the files. So this is the start of a playlist I'm going to do for this channel solely on Jeffrey Epstein and what we know about him, what we're learning along the way. So I want to start with my biggest question is where the hell did he get his money? Because he was a high school teacher, high school math teacher with no formal college education, yet he was teaching at a prestigious high school. And then he ends up in the stock market as a trader, and he ends up in some pyramid schemes. Now, Whitney Webb in an interview did say that at some point Robert Maxwell met Jeffrey Epstein before Maxwell perished, disappeared. Let's get one thing straight with Robert Maxwell. Nobody found his body. It was presumed that he fell off of his yacht and his body was never recovered. So who knows? But what we do know is that along with his disappearance, that the pension fund for the newspaper that he owned and operated, that also disappeared too. And it was stated that that money basically disappeared to a pyramid scheme, which Jeffrey Epstein was very big on pyramid schemes at the time. So I found, this is from page 164 in volume 2, Enter Epstein. And this chapter is primarily about Ghislaine. Okay, I know how to say it right, but considering who she is and her reputation, I'm just going to call her Jizzy. So, enter Epstein. Following her father's death, Jizzy publicly claimed to know next to nothing of his affairs and have no money herself. Why do I think that's a bunch of BS? Despite it being well known that her father had created numerous trusts in the Liechtenstein tax haven that were meant to fund the Maxwell family for generations. Not that she was ever going to have kids because she's too busy diddling kids. A New York detective who interviewed Jizzy in Manhattan while trying to trace her father's assets later stated she came in dressed in sackcloth and ashes. It was pathetic. Really? She said she had no money, yet here was this expensive lawyer arguing with us in a room so air-conditioned we couldn't hear what he said. In between claiming she had no money, you couldn't but help warming to her. She was so solicitous. We hadn't had any lunch, and she was recommending restaurants here and there and where to stay and go shopping and slipping in from time to time how she never had anything to do with her father's affairs. So clearly she's just a lying POS. And she also thinks she's a great actor. Clearly people are pointing out what a stunt this was. Another investigator said that it is entirely possible, and we didn't have the resources to check, that Maxwell could have siphoned off money from some of his 400 companies in America to her. She was living on something. 400 companies. And of course, these aren't real companies. They don't have employees. It's just companies on paper. In 1992, Jizzy repeated the claims that she was destitute, but promised her family would soon make a comeback. That year, she told Vanity Fair, I'm surveying I can't just die quietly in a corner. It would say, I would say, we'll be back. Watch this space. As previously mentioned, it was during this time period that Maxwell's siblings were circling the wagons and attempting to rebuild their father's empire and legacy, potentially including his intelligence activities. Huh. It later emerged that during this period and the years that followed, Jizzy had shifted from being dependent on her father to being entirely dependent on Jeffrey Epstein for her lavish lifestyle. See, I believe, I'm stopping reading here for a second. I believe that Jeffrey was set up as like the heir to Robert Maxwell when it came to clandestine operations. I think that's where the money came from, and I think that Ghislaine was Jeffrey's handler. Like, she knew the operations beforehand and was there to like guide him on what he was supposed to do afterwards. Some acquaintances of Jizzy have since claimed that she started working for Epstein immediately after her father died. Jizzy and Jeffrey Epstein's public relationship is believed to have officially begun in 1991 during a tribute dinner at the Plaza Hotel held in Robert Maxwell's honor. Now, if Jeffrey's been working on Wall Street, how the hell does he know about Robert Maxwell over in the UK? Where Epstein sat at the same table with Jizzy and Betty Maxwell. According to media reports, this was Jizzy's first step in public announcing in her deep affection for him, Epstein. The choice of the plaza would prove to be ironic given that Jizzy and Epstein were beginning an extensive sexual blackmail operation that would go on for well over a decade. A decade? Well over a decade. You're only saying it was 1 decade. As detailed in Chapter 2, the hotel had previously been the site of a sexual blackmail operation involving the infamous lawyer Roy Cohen and his mentor, the liquor magnate Louis Rosenstahl. The Plaza Hotel was purchased in 1998, not long after Cohen's death, by Cohen's protege, Donald Trump. Interesting. In that year that followed, his first public appearance with Jizzy, Epstein was treated by both the press and those close to Jizzy as her father reincorporated with various media reports stating and or quoting their associates comparing Epstein directly to Robert Maxwell. Some of these reports, some published as early as 1992, also openly discussed the possibility that Epstein, like Robert Maxwell, was working for Israeli intelligence as well as the CIA, which Epstein did state to some people that he was working for the CIA, and then later backtracked and was like, I never said that. So yeah, okay. That is how they met. But let's look at the money. So I'm going to do a little bit of Googling here. Epstein estate worth. Let's see here. We're going to be looking at, let's say 2000. Even though that's 10 years later. So they're saying $600 million at his death, thanks mostly to 2 wealthy billionaire clients. That's a bunch of crap. 2019, $559 million worth of assets. Okay, so about $600 million. Let's see here. Robert Maxwell pension fund scandal. Robert Maxwell pension scandal involved the fraudulent misappropriation of over £400 million from Mirror Group newspaper. The theft, 460 million. Okay, so let's see here. 460 million pounds to dollars. Now the 620 million. That's pretty interesting. But let's say 2019. How would that translate? 587 million. That's awfully close to, I mean, you deduct a mansion or two, a few $100 per underage girl for a massage over the years. I'm just saying, it's funny how the money in the bank for Jeffrey Epstein is just about equivalent to what was taken out of the British pension fund. It's pretty interesting. And let's see here. Epstein scheme. What was that? 1989? The untold story of how Jeffrey Epstein got rich. New York Times. Let's take a look at this article, unless it's got a paywall. Scam schemes, ruthless cons. The untold story of how Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, yeah, there's a paywall, of course. Well, to heck with you. But there is an overview. Let's take a look at the overview here. Jeffrey Epstein was associated with Tower Financial Corporation, which operated a massive Ponzi scheme. Departing around 1989 before its 1993 collapse, which defrauded investors of over $450 million. That's awfully close to another amount of money, right? While Towers Financial Corporation founder Stephen Hoffenberg alleged Epstein was involved, Epstein was never charged for his fraud. It's almost like he was running an operation to funnel money out of one country to another in order to implement an espionage scheme for another agency. The scheme, Towers Financial, was a debt collection agency that operated a Ponzi scheme, which at the time was considered one of the largest in U.S. history. Epstein's role. Stephen Hoffenberg, the CEO of Towers Financial, claimed in court documents that Epstein was intimately involved in the scheme. Okay, Epstein left Towers Financial by 1989, well before the company fully imploded in 1993. Okay. Let's see where Robert Maxwell, pension investment. Where did he invest the money? That's the big thing. He died in 1991, famously stole over $400 million from Mirror Group. Scandal. Let's see here. The theft. Used pension assets as collateral for loans, moving money between companies to hide his debts and fund acquisitions. Wasn't there a part where it talked about how he invested a lot of the money? 30,000 pensioners were affected, with some losing up to half of their anticipated pension value. Recovery. A significant portion of the funds was eventually recovered through government intervention and not at all restored to beneficiaries. Though not all of it was restored. Okay, the incident remains a landmark. Do with the pension funds. Let me look here. Okay, so it might look like at this point, now we're back to volume 2. This is page 144. That Ghislaine might be more involved in the funneling of money than originally anticipated. In much the same way as Ghislaine's young personal life was controlled by her father, her entry into the working world was her graduation from Oxford, as Oxford was directly facilitated and managed by Robert Maxwell, with his setting her up with a string of jobs across his business empire. By 1984, at age 22, she was serving as a director of the British football club Oxford United alongside her brother Kevin. At the time, Robert Maxwell held shares in the club, though through a company created explicitly for that purpose. He served as the club's chairman beginning in 1982. Prior to and during this time period, Ghislaine worked in various roles in her father's companies, Pergamon Press and the Mirror Group, remember the newspaper, with British media later describing her early career as entirely dependent on her father's patronage. She was working for the Mirror Group by 1984 and possibly earlier. During this period, Robert often used Ghislaine to market and generally represent his newspaper's publicity. In 1985, with Robert Maxwell's full approval, The People, the Sunday edition of the Daily Mirror, ran a story claiming that efforts were being made to blackmail the paper's publisher, Robert Maxwell himself. Gee, I wonder why. The blackmailer had reportedly threatened Maxwell with information regarding Ghislaine's alleged relationship with David Manners, the then Marquis of Granby, and the future Duke of Rutland. I've never heard of any of these positions. The article sought to paint Robert Maxwell as bravely resisting the blackmailer, but there is more to the story. Oh, do tell. This astonishing article claimed that people connected with the British MP, Harvey Procter, had tried to blackmail Maxwell via The People. The article claimed that a sinister phone caller, I mean, it's in quotes, sinister phone caller, had warned that if the newspaper continued to campaign to expose Harvey Procter, they would produce a story about Ghislaine and Lord Granby at Belvoir Castle with incriminating pictures of them in compromising positions. Manners denied the claim, stating that he and Ghislaine were merely friends. I mean, friends with benefits? The bizarre decision to publish a front-page story exploiting his own daughter's alleged sexual relationship because of an anonymous phone call was especially odd, given that Robert Maxwell had previously been known for his tight control over his youngest daughter's love life. Is he bragging that he got his daughter to bone this dude? As previously mentioned, he had banned her boyfriends from visiting the family house and had gone to great lengths to prevent her from being seen in public with them. Yet, for whatever reason, Robert Maxwell clearly wanted information linking Ghislaine to the future Duke to be put out into the public sphere. Though it is difficult to know exactly what was behind this odd episode in Ghislaine's past, the situation suggested that Robert Maxwell saw Ghislaine's young sexuality as a useful tool. And what a tool he is. The story is also odd for other reasons. The motive of the blackmailer was ostensibly to prevent Maxwell-owned papers from covering the Harvey Procter scandal, but Manners, Lord Granby in the article, who was allegedly involved with Ghislaine, was also a close friend and later employer of Harvey Procter. Why would someone close to Procter seek to blackmail Maxwell by putting the reputation of his own friend on the line? In addition, the appearance of Harvey Procter, then the Conservative Member of Parliament, in this tabloid spectacle is interesting for a few reasons. In 1987, Proctor pleaded guilty to sexual indecency with two young men who were 16 and 19 at the time. And several witnesses interviewed in that investigation described him as having a sexual interest in young boys. And what does that say about a young Ghislaine? Later, a controversial court case saw Proctor accused of having been involved with the well-connected British pedo and procurer of children, Jimmy Savile, as well as being part of a child abuse ring that was said to include not only Savile, but former UK Minister Ted Heath. Okay, so that took like a really weird, was the whole idea of there allegedly being these photos, for one, I think Robert Maxwell basically made up the blackmail operation against him in the newspaper, maybe to take the eyes off of these child predators who he was in control of. That's just a thought. Well, I'll prove you're not by saying you slept with my daughter. So yeah, this stuff goes way back. I'm also going to do another video on Epstein before there was Epstein, which I got to find the book for. So anyways, that is my first installment. Hope you enjoyed. As you can tell, there's a lot more to go through. So it's going to be a long journey. Keep on typing.